So hi, I'm Kara. You've been getting my emails. I'm the resident educator at Smore. I spent 8 years as a high school English teacher and 8 years as a middle school principal and 3 years as head of school at a private school. During that time, I earned a master's in education leadership from Teachers College and a doctorate in teaching and learning from NYU. And I also spent 5 years as the executive director of a nonprofit called Mac for America, for which I developed a professional learning community for amazing STEM teachers in the New York City DOE. And I'm also married to a math education professor who 4 years ago was offered a position at a university in Israel. And so we moved our family across the world, and that's how I found my way to Smore. And I actually started at Smore 2 weeks before the first pandemic lockdown. And as you can imagine, I threw myself into doing whatever I could to support all the educators switching over to remote learning and just doing my best to make myself useful. And at Smore, I make a lot of content for our Education Hive. I write education-focused newsletters. I write our blog and our tweets, and I consult with all of our teams at Smore about the needs of principals, teachers, librarians, etc. This is my second webinar for Smore, and I've got a few more planned for August and September, but I have to tell you that I'm not as adept on Zoom as folks who spent a year teaching on it. And also I want to mention that one of my biggest pet peeves is having slides read to me. So I'm going to share information with each slide, but I'm not going to read them to you. And since you probably didn't hear me at the beginning when I was just noting that we have people from all over the country, and so it's so great to see like Kentucky, Kansas, Massachusetts, Indiana, Texas, California, Minnesota, Missouri, Canada, Wisconsin, Virginia, Florida, amazing, Atlanta. Look, this is my test that I know all of the abbreviations for states. Illinois, South Carolina, LA, Virginia, awesome. I'm so happy to see all of you on here. Thank you so much for joining me. And let's dive right in. So I know that everyone is really busy, and I appreciate that you've taken the time to join me today. My goal is to give you concrete, actionable tips that you can immediately implement. So let's dive right in. So as the in-between, summer offers an opportunity to both look back and look ahead in your communications. Looking back gives you the opportunity to spend some time celebrating the wins of the past year. It's fun, but it's also a deliberate strategy to keep families connected during this key time when enrollment can drop. Maybe you're going to focus on celebrating each grade in a different newsletter, or highlighting successful new clubs or programs, or great moments in the arts or athletics or the science fair, and championing teachers and staff members who made a difference. Okay, number 2, prep the page is a writing expression, meaning you don't want to sit staring at a blank piece of paper. You want to put down your bullet points or your main themes and then fill in the details. And it's helpful because it makes you feel like you've got a clear path ahead. But really, I'm just using it as a metaphor. So translating this for back to school newsletters, by prep the page, I mean use your newsletters to give families a peek into the year ahead. You want to let folks know what's coming and demystify their return to school. And this goes a long way towards reducing back to school anxiety. And look, here's the most important thing I'm going to say today. The more you communicate with parents, the more you set the stage for their child's success. Why? Because taking the time to communicate regularly with parents builds trust with them. And when parents trust the principal and the teachers, they more actively support their child's learning. And this is not just me saying this, this is what the research shows. Okay, so let's talk about what should go into your summer communications. First of all, in summer, you can keep the tone light. You can think of it as casual and engaging. You can come up with fun categories like the ones I've noted here. But I would love to hear your ideas for other kinds of categories, so please feel free to drop them in the chat. And I also want to say my very last one is use emojis. And yes, use emojis. I put that there on purpose. Emojis attract attention, they build interest, and they add personality. And your millennial audience, which is probably the majority of your parents at this point, will appreciate them. All right, so once you've got your categories, you want to decide how often you want to send your communications. You can send them weekly, you can send them bi-weekly, or my last place choice would be monthly. But you want to try to always send at the same time, same day, same time. And the consistency trains your readers to anticipate your update. And then once your newsletter is delivered, you want multilingual families to be able to translate your newsletter into their home language. So you want to make sure you regularly include directions about how to do that. With Smore, once a parent has done this once, Smore will automatically translate their newsletter into their chosen language going forward. But a simple screen grab like the one on this slide will communicate how you go about doing this. You don't need to do this with every update, but if you do it with like regularity, it means that you're demonstrating to multilingual families that you care about their participation. And then the last thing is you want to make sure to post your newsletter everywhere that your readers are. And as an example, here's one school's weekly newsletter posted on Facebook, on Twitter, and on the school's website. All right, so I want to just summarize what I've covered for the look back part of summer communications before I move into look forward. You want to pick some categories for your summer updates. You want to make sure to celebrate school wins from the past year. You want to share something personal so that you're connecting with people. You want to choose how often you want to send your updates and then precisely when you will send them, and then stick to that. If you have immigrant families in your community, make sure to regularly include translation instructions and then post that newsletter every place you can. This level of consistency builds trust and it builds strong relationships with your constituencies. It gives a portal into life at school and it pays off in terms of student success and also like in not answering the same question 400 times. And at the end of every newsletter, you want to tease the next one to build continuity and intrigue and expectation. Okay, about 3 weeks before school actually starts, you're going to want to shift into back to school mode. So rather than celebrate the past year, you want to start to raise anticipation about the coming year. From an SEL perspective, we want to use back to school communications to reduce anxiety about returning to school. Last summer, I made a Meet the Teacher template, which was on our education hive and which was very popular with people. And this year I got to thinking, like, who else would it be good to meet ahead of time via a newsletter? So I made one for the new principals, but it works just as well for a principal, an old principal, to introduce themselves to new families. Meet the Teacher, Meet the Building has like some of the key spaces in the building, some information about procedures, introduces the maintenance staff. I also have on our education hive templates for Meet the Librarian and Meet the Guidance and Counseling Office. And these are all ways of communicating your school's values, your school mission, and your school's approach to family participation. And if you have ideas for other ones that I could add to the Meet series, like, please drop your suggestions in the chat. I would love to see what you recommend. All right, I also want to talk about the word welcome. Did you know that while the average email open rate is only 20%, welcome emails with the word welcome have an 80% open rate, so dramatically different. So in addition to other summer communications, you should know that your most read summer update will be your welcome back newsletter to families. This is your formal summer communication. It has to include the need to know info for the first day or week of school. You're going to want to anticipate questions that families will have and then provide clear answers to those questions. And if you don't have a formal welcome back newsletter to duplicate from last year, I've got one for you here. Your welcome letter is really the official launch of your 2022-2023 communications. So what are some topics you would want to include in this welcome newsletter? And please, I see the chat is not so active, but feel free to drop ideas in it. So what I included in here in this template was the first day schedule, the lunch menu for the first week, an introduction to new faculty, a notice from the PTO, a save the date for back to school night, forms from the nurse, and a downloadable school calendar for the fridge. I also included a resource for parents because if anyone here is a parent, you know we need all the help we can get. And this wraps up part 1 of the agenda, summer updates for families. And before I move on to part 2, I want to just check and see if there are any questions or if anybody would like to pop any questions into the chat. And thank you for these suggestions. Meet the school secretary. Yes, family conference signups. I actually have a whole parent conference newsletter template on the Hive, but I should include in that a form for the sign up. Drop off pickup procedures, beginning and end of day return routines. Yes, awesome. Cell phone expectations. Oh God, maybe someone could write those for my home too. Somebody asked about duplicating a newsletter. So when you're on your page of the website and you see all of the images of your newsletters, if you hover, you'll see an options button, and under the options will be duplicate a newsletter. How to support the school. Nice. Amazon Smile. Awesome. Volunteer options. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. These are great. All right, and can I briefly review the agenda? Yeah, the agenda is part 1. I talked about parent communications. I'm about to jump into faculty communications, and then I want to talk about newsletter best practices. And Libby asked, where can we get this information? I'm presenting like samples of newsletters. So tomorrow or the day after, you're going to get a wrap-up newsletter from me, and it's going to have links to all of these templates and links to blog posts and links to these slides and a recording of the webinar. But I make templates like this all the time, and I post them on the Education Hive on the Smore website, which is, you know, in our drop-down menu, so you can find that easily. And okay, so all right, I'm going to move on to part 2. All right, so part 2, you can think of summer faculty communications as having 4 main functions, with the first and most obvious to convey important information. In addition, just like with families, you want your faculty members and your staff to feel in relationship with you. So yes, your team needs a break in the summer. So you don't need to bombard them with back to school info right when they've gotten off on break. But even during the break, it's healthy to keep your team connected to you and to the building in a low stakes way. Number 2, the building leader sets the tone. So how you communicate and what you communicate should model how you want teachers and other admin to communicate with parents. The tone that you set and the way you share information in your newsletter to faculty is a model for what you want them to do in their newsletters to parents. And lastly, and I'm sure you know this, but feeling undervalued is a main driver in people leaving their jobs. And the last thing anyone needs to deal with right now is more staff shortage. So my recommendation is every week or with every update, find a way to honor and acknowledge a few faculty members until you've covered them all, and keep this up during the school year. I also wrote a blog post for Smore about this, and I'll include a link to that on the follow-up email. So here are 4 suggestions for what to include in your regular summer updates to faculty. And I do want to mention for anyone who joined in late that I promised at the beginning that I wouldn't read any slides, because it drives me crazy when people read slides to me. So I'm not going to read it. So take a look, and then I would love suggestions for other things that would be great to include, categories of things that would be great to include in summer updates for faculty and staff. Okay, and then as you remember what I said about the word welcome and the much higher engagement that it gets, 2 to 3 weeks before your teachers are due back, you want to send out their version of the welcome letter. And where your earlier updates might have been a little chattier, this one is perhaps a little more formal in tone, but still warm, fun, welcoming. The bottom line for your faculty, you know, the only thing they really care about knowing is how many meetings do we have and how much time do I have to set up my room. So you definitely want to include those things. And suggestions for what else to include, I'm sure people would love to see your ideas. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And that's really my main points about faculty communications in the summer. So most of what I've talked about so far is about content, what you're putting into the newsletters. But with this slide, I want to shift into how you put together a newsletter rather than what you put in it. So I want you to take a look at the stats in this slide. What these stats tell you is that how your update looks is just as important as what it says. Because if it doesn't look easy to read, people simply won't read it. I mean, you can think about your own email reading habits. I came into this business as an educator, but I am gonna leave it as a proselytizer for formatting and design. As school leaders, we have important messages to convey, and we need to say them in a way that gets them the attention they merit. So you have to think that every single component of your newsletter is valuable space. And that starts with your title. Your title can be cute, it can be alliterative, but it's got to follow these 3 rules. It has to be, you have to be clear who it's for, what it's about, and why someone should read it. And I want to just give you an example. So let's look at this example from the point of view of a parent, and we'll start on the left. The title of the newsletter is Second Grade Scholars. So let's put it through the 3W test. Who's the newsletter for? I guess it's for the second grade scholars. What is it about? Well, maybe it's about the second grade scholars. And why should I read it? I don't know. The title does not tell me why I should read it. So that title doesn't pass the 3W test. Let's look at example number 2. This week in second grade, important info for families. So even though the title is long, it tells me who, it tells me what, and it tells me why. Long and clear gets you more readers than brief and unclear. Clear always wins. Okay, so now we've talked about the title of the newsletter, but good descriptive titles are also essential in the body of your newsletter because it makes it easier for people to skim the update on mobile. There will be sections that are relevant for people and sections that aren't. If there's no way to quickly tell what those sections are, people just won't read the update at all. And so these are essentially the categories or the sections of your newsletter, and you can keep them consistent from week to week. And you can see in the slide, you know, I have a piece of a newsletter, and you can see that there are 2 visible sections. What's happening in the building and parent resources for summer. Easy categories to repeat week in and week out. Okay, so now I want to talk about what I call Marie Kondoing your newsletter. Anytime you find yourself going old school and writing a long paragraph, I want you to hit the keyboard brakes, because nobody is gonna read it. And no offense, it might be Pulitzer Prize winning prose, but what use is that if nobody reads it? So let's look at an example. Here on the slide is a very sweet paragraph about the ways that playing with pets helps you to relax. So it's part of, you know, like a SEL for faculty, like a wellness newsletter. It's very nice, but let's KonMari it. Okay, so let's go back. So I took that paragraph and I turned it into this. So this turns into this. First, I took the bolded part of the paragraph and I turned it into a headline. So you can see the bolded part, and then you see it as a headline with an emoji. I took the bulk of the text and I replaced it with a photo that just captures the essence of what the author is trying to convey. And then I pulled out 2 key sentences and put them there with some space in between so they're easy to skim. And then here at the very end, there's a citation. Rather than write out the citation for the research, I just hyperlinked it to the actual article, which means that anyone who's interested can click on it and go directly to read the article. So the second will get more readers and more engagement. All right, let's talk for a minute about branding. So what's your school's niche? What makes you special or distinguishes you from other schools in your area? If you capture those things via design, that's branding. And you can use branding to elevate your school's visibility. So here on this slide are 4 easy ways to brand your newsletters. And if you have other ideas of things that you do or things that you think would be great, feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay, and the very last thing that you do is share your update. So if you have the option of a subject line, which you might with your MNS and you might not, but you definitely will with an email, you want to follow the same rules of good formatting as a means of upping your engagement. And at the very end of this slide, I just want to point out number 4 is how to try to capture the readers who didn't open your update the first time you sent it out. And this is actually my next to last slide. So I want to just tell you before I get to the last slide, thank you for joining me. I'm going to send you a follow-up newsletter with the recording, the slides, the links to the templates, the blog posts, stats that I've referenced. And I want to take a few minutes for any questions or comments and tell you that I'm going to be offering some different topics in August. And I see, Bree, you have raised your hand. I don't even know if I know how to.
I have a question.
I'm muted now. Go ahead, Bree.
Yeah. So I use Smore primarily for my weekly newsletters to my staff. And up until last year, we had always sent out a hard
Bree, you're
copy.
unmuted. So if you want to ask a question,
you
can go right ahead. All right. So
can you hear me?
Here's a slide with the key takeaways from the past half hour.
Can you hear me now?
And
are you able to hear me?
Screenshot it or
hey, Kara,
not,
can you hear any of
send
us?
it to you. And I couldn't hear her. No. Bree, will you drop it in the chat?
Yes.
I can't hear you, and I don't know why, because even though I work for a tech company, I'm not always so great with tech. All right, so everybody could hear Bree, but not me. Bree, could you drop your question, or can someone drop Bree's comment or question into the chat, and then I can see it and try to respond? Sorry about that. Oh, is there a way to distinguish who has access to the newsletter by audience? So one of the things that I like to do or like to suggest to people is to make different mailing lists. So let's say you're a high school principal and you create one weekly update, but you want to emphasize different parts of it to different members of the community. You might create one mailing list for 9th grade parents, one for 10th, one for 11th, one for 12th. And then your subject lines can be different because you want to point out different things to them. And then you can differentiate the newsletter if you feel like it, but you can also just send the exact same newsletter out to different audiences by way of your mailing lists. I hope that helps. Anyone else? I don't know why I can't hear, but feel free to drop questions in the chat. Thank you, Anne. Very nice. And so I'm sure that there are other mass notification systems that have other kinds of systems. Same with the one that I used at the school that I was at most recently. It was the same thing. I could choose which group of parents or which faculty members I wanted to send to. Earl asked, are there any branding picture tools you'd recommend using for Smore? We have an integration with Canva. So as Jake just said, he uses Canva to create his logos. Yeah, so if I would recommend creating something in Canva, and then you can just drop it into your newsletter, and then you don't have to kind of recreate, then you've got your one branded image. Oh, the bunny, so you have the Carrot Chronicles. Oh my God, that's so cute. Anybody else? Comments, questions? All right, well, I'm going to say thank you so much. You all deserve a calm school year, and I'm really wishing that for all of us. And take care and enjoy the rest of your summer. And thanks so much, everybody. How do you get a quote for the cost? If you go to the website, let's see here, you can go to, I'm going to just type the link, smore.com. Get a demo. That might be it. Well, I don't know, actually. Yeah, Garrett, get it at smore.com, get a demo. Thank you, David. David is my boss. And that's for if you want to do a team account so that you can have your whole team, your teachers, your athletic director, everyone communicating with parents. So there's like a consistency to it. I know. Thank you, Sister Sean Thomas. That's a very nice message. I appreciate it. All right, I'm going to let you all go. I hope that you'll join me for another one. And again, I appreciate your time. Take care and bye-bye.